Turn to unmute us. David, can you hear us?
Yep, can hear you.
We are right at 4, and we basically have everyone here, which is amazing, and no one seems like the hail got them, at least not too bad. So we'll just jump in. I said this to a few folks. If you read 400 pages of material before this meeting, you made a mistake. But that's also maybe you're just really committed and you just couldn't resist. So just know, like, everyone should know that. Let's just do a quick round of introductions, mostly for the minute taker. So Brad Calvert's planning staff.
Clay Bruce,
Tom Peterson,
Sarah Leonard,
Steve Frazier,
Jessica Conrad,
Bill Stillman, Chris Stiles.
Emily McLaren.
And so just Emily Katzman with YVHA is recusing herself from today's conversation, as is Williford from ski area Altera. So they both have some connection to proposals you've either seen or maybe not quite seen quite yet. So they just thought it best to sort of step out of the entire conversation today. So just so everybody knows that. David is probably the only person that has read all 400 pages.
Not all 400, but
yes. As Emily mentioned, there are things that you can kind of skip if you want. But
Just a conflict of interest, one of the proposals that came in from May Winkler is one of our active clients. I don't know if I should step away from that one. I'm happy to. I have no stake in what he's proposing, but just to let you know, we do deals with him all the time. He's been a client for years. It's out there. So.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a preamble that I wanted to sort of, just so that everybody, my goal for you today is, if we start on a path of evaluating these proposals today, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. I want you to have the adequate time to do that. The goal of today's meeting is to simply make sure you feel equipped, right? So that you can actually start your journey to read 400 pages and come back in 2 weeks and have a thoughtful discussion about what you would recommend to city council. So today's conversation is really, again, making sure you feel ready. You feel like you have the tools that you need. So for instance, we did draft kind of very basic kind of evaluation form. We can talk about that today. If you want to tweak it some to help you in that task, we can do it with a very real sort of understanding that it needs to connect back to the RFP. We've established in the RFP how we are going to evaluate proposals. So like you have some ability to sort of futz a little bit, like only so much. And then we do, for folks that did maybe get a chance to at least skim, today's a chance to talk about clarifying questions. Like we've established in the RFP that a respondent is going to submit a proposal, and quick pause. I may say respondent and applicant. I may interchange those words. They're the same thing to me. So just know that. Essentially we've communicated to respondents, we may ask through this process clarifying questions. That is from the advisory committee all the way through council conversation. So they have been noticed that there may be requests for additional information. That should not be new to them. That should be expected, but we have communicated that. So that we do want to at least give this group a chance to maybe surface some clarifying questions that I can go ahead and start compiling and getting out to any applicants or respondents that we just feel like there's things that you need to know or better understand to sort of perform your function to evaluate their proposal.
I'm sorry, Brad.
Yeah.
Was that something that we're going to do today or wait until next time? Today
And after we leave, I'll cover all that. So this group it's gonna be a little bit of like business stuff. We do have minutes for your last 2 meetings. They came to me in the last couple of days. I haven't had time to I have to review them before I put them in front of you. At your next meeting, you will probably actually consider and presumably approve minutes from hopefully all of your meetings. So just know that as a task you haven't done yet, but that will be something that's going to be on your list for next time. A little bit of orientation to, again, sort of a pretty large packet. So obviously proposals were due Friday, 5 o'clock. So, it took a little time just to even do basic intake. So we just, David and Avery needed to get through the process to create a summary. I didn't want to give you all the proposals and not give you a high level summary because I didn't want to set that expectation. You needed to read everything after today. So it obviously took us until essentially 5 o'clock yesterday, I think, to have everything ready to go. We did catch one small error in attachment 3, which is that summary document, sort of late last night, so we fixed it today. So if you actually look at the online version, it should be accurate. As far as we know, that was a relatively minor thing that we caught. I think the memo sort of paints this picture that we did receive 7 proposals. Steve was asking if that was about kind of what we expected, and that's probably about where I thought we would be. 2 of those proposals essentially requested confidentiality to a degree that we simply cannot grant, through how this process has been laid out and described, and the transparency that we were expecting through this process, as well as sort of some like base, Colorado Open Record Acts stuff. I mean, they were essentially asking for pretty blanket confidentiality that we can't grant. So I've held back 2 proposals until they are ready to go forward. So they were issued letters yesterday that essentially give them a couple of paths forward. They can take the proposal as submitted and offer a redacted version that they feel like is Cora compliant, to call it something. Our legal team would have to sign off that, yes, they agree with that. They also have the option to withdraw their proposal if they just simply don't feel like they want to share what is included in the proposal. They have that option. So I'm essentially by the end of the week, most of that dust should settle. So if we end up with 7, if we end up with 2 more, you will receive those as soon as I can deliver them to you. If we end up down this path of there's a redacted version and an original version, a full version, let's call it, you actually will see the full version. When I publish your agenda packet, it will only be the redacted version. And that's a bridge, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, sort of thing. I don't want to get like too much into like how we'll handle sort of sharing, distributing sort of that unredacted version, but just know we may end up in that space. I'll stop there. Anything so far? Because I probably will hit like a couple of things before we really get into the discussion. Go, Steve.
Easy question. The 5 that we have and the 2 maybe, that's all. We're not considering reopening or anything along those lines.
Correct.
Okay.
To that point, I had a few folks sort of in the process suggest that maybe there wasn't enough time being offered. I think this group even talked about that. And I essentially encourage people, if you feel that way, submit a question. You can submit a question through the procurement process that says, we were not off, in our opinion, there hasn't been enough time to sort of give you the amount of detailed information that you want. Therefore, would you be amenable to an extension? That may have been granted, we would see. So there was an option for others to request an extension that may have brought more applications.
And nobody did that.
No, this is the 7. We didn't publish it, we received no questions. So therefore, normally the way this goes is you publish the RFP, if you get questions, you offer an addendum where you respond to those questions in writing. You received 0 questions, which frankly was like a little bit of my nervous point. Like, do they know this is out there? It's very unusual not to get any questions. But apparently that was something I had unnecessary anxiety about. Anything like what I've covered so far? Okay, I'm gonna go to my next one. Yeah, I wrote lots of notes so I don't forget stuff. I want to maybe, before we talk about very specifically what we're going to do today, I want to just have this like step back moment so that like we can all see ourselves in the sort of bigger process here. We have 7 proposals. This group, along with staff, will essentially make a recommendation to City Council. Council has established sort of this $5 to $10 million funding target. So like all of that precedes sort of where we are today. This is Brad Calvert's opinion, any more so than anything else. I view the establishment of a funding target of giving us a little bit of latitude in terms of what our recommendations. When I say our, I essentially say yours and staff's. I mean, I suspect what will happen is you will come to a decision and make a recommendation, hopefully at your next meeting, and it will come in parallel with maybe some additional staff context when it goes to council. So just know that's kind of what that will feel like. We will talk more about this next time, but but I kind of feel like what this is gonna end up being like is if you feel like there are sort of a number of proposals that are supportable, investable, whatever term we feel like we want to use, that this set of recommendations may essentially say, within that $5 to $10 million sort of funding target, this is our recommendation. Maybe it's one thing, maybe it's two things. We also feel like there are two other, how many other that we feel like are supportable and investable, and these would be our priority order. So it will be something that essentially gives council the flexibility that they're gonna have anyway, but essentially gives you a chance to really sort of say, these are where our findings are, where our priorities are based on what we've seen in the proposals. So that's kind of how I feel like the conversation will be. You may not arrive at, you may arrive at a finding that you don't think anything is investable, supportable right now. You may feel like within that $5 to $10 million funding target, you're comfortable just simply making that recommendation, or again, there may be, we feel like these are fundable, but obviously council set a target. This would take you sort of outside of that target. So, but again, I'm presupposing your conversation. To me, all of those things are sort of on the horizon potentially. I would suggest, and you all can push back this week or next time, if you simply don't feel like something is investable or supportable from your perspective, to me, there's no ranking. Like, it just comes forward without, there is no recommendation for this. It's maybe a good project, but within the very narrow constraints of this RFP, it does not feel like it's investable. There are good projects that don't feel like they're going to deliver units within 1 to 3 years. That's what this RFP was designed to do. So you all have that license to sort of think about how you're communicating sort of a full set of recommendations to council. And then obviously, if we can get this done on the 28th, amazing. And then it's sort of incumbent upon largely Rebecca and myself to prepare something for council, hopefully in September, that again, just sort of kicks off a next phase of review and evaluation with the state. I mean, I think the RFP stated the goal by the end of the year will essentially be a line item sort of budget appropriations. Should you make a recommendation and council agree and continue to negotiate with that applicant to come to sort of a final decision or recommendation in terms of a budget level appropriation. So hopefully all this sort of gets a tidy little bow at the end of the year. But I mean, at some point your work is done, and it really is with council to continue that conversation.
I think there's any possibility that that funding timeline gets escalated? Or,
Say more about that.
so
Like October 2024.
potentially, yes.
Sure. I mean,
So
yeah,
it's not like a hard
No.
line in the sand that we're not gonna make a decision until
No.
December.
no,
city council.
that timeline is essentially communicated outside bound
Okay,
to applicants that, like, in the reality, like, this, I think we've actually extended sort of the period at which this bid is considered sort of, a fair description of their proposal, like out to 120 days to get us through the end of the year, because to that point, let's play this out. But there is one that gets talked about and negotiated to the level of having a budget level appropriation first. That may mean this next one is the next in line, and council may choose to take these one at a time, right? I mean, because each deal is going to be different, and I think it actually frankly would be kind of unfair to ask them to like have this level of due diligence on a deal, on two deals at the same time.
So, just to tack onto that, but hasn't the city council been kind of pressuring you, Brad, to when are we gonna get to see these proposals on near-term housing? Because that's such a goal of the council.
No, I wouldn't. No. I mean, I don't think of it that way.
So if there were three reasonable $3 million proposals, you would think that you would even rank those, like if you would say if I had
Yeah.
a 10 million, I'd do 3, but they probably still look at them.
This, the way I think about this is, I've done some version of this many, many, many times. First time I've done it with this funding source and this content, like everything, so it's, I think you should give them a recommendation that is in rank order. And, the thing that sort of gets described here through maybe different processes, sort of above the line and below the line. Above the line is $10 million or less, I mean, below, yeah, and below the line is essentially you're $1 over $10 million, but I still think if you think it's investable, you note it. And that may be option number 3 or 4.
And do you think, you talked about your sort of additional staff recommendation next to ours, I mean, can that include narrative, like, this is a good project, but you should consider maybe a different structure than that was proposed?
Yes, all of that. Essentially, the way I would think,
Suggestions for
correct.
due diligence?
I suspect there, I mean, there is a version where staff could have a different conclusion, right? And a different set of recommendations or a different set of findings. What I would more likely expect is, Emily, where you're taking it is like, as you begin this next phase, these are the things that you ought to consider as you enter something like negotiation. And a lot of that's gonna come from you all, but some of that may come from staff as well.
I'm gonna apply that same concept to the next, and the kind of the mid-level and the future level associated with all of the tax appropriations associated with short-term funding, right? I mean, this isn't a one-time deal, right? You got 2025, 2026 funding sources that are gonna be coming through. We see a project that maybe isn't top of the priority list, seriously consider it for future funding mechanisms, possibility as well to include those recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, my job is to communicate to council the findings of this group.
Okay.
Says the only thing that I'm gonna try to do to box you in is essentially make what you're recommending is efficient and as easy for them to sort of deal with as possible, to call it something. But if your recommendation is like, we are suggesting that under this RFP, proposal number 4 is not fundable, but we think it's a really good example of the type of project that could be funded out of STR tax funds in the future. I think you should say that. That makes sense?
Yep.
I mean, just this is a learning experience, right? So like, I mean, we will ask the question sort of at the next meeting, like, what do we take away from this? And like, keeping recognizing good projects that simply aren't fundable at the time, to me, is probably something that should be talked about. Like, it doesn't guarantee funding in the future, but like, if there is a group like this that's having these conversations in the future and they see something they like that it just doesn't fit, or there's not enough money, like communicating that it should remain something that's considered in the future, I think makes sense.
Well, I also think that, if it's representative of the goals and objectives of this group and city council, it then tells the community, hey, think about these types of projects, especially if
Yep.
city council
Yes.
embraces them.
So to that, I mean, I don't know how many folks, maybe I said this in this group, I know David and I talked about this. There was a very real sort of success factor with this process that was simply communicating that the city is in the business of putting public dollars into private projects that yield affordable entertainment units, right? So I got sort of communications from folks who did not end up applying, in part because they didn't really have a site quite yet. But this sort of communicates to them, like, they probably ought to get serious, because there may be something on the horizon that allows them to do the deal that they're thinking about.
Which is why I think, thinking about the future, I know that's something I should, a term sheet so that developers know if I can get a hold of a site and I can provide these outcomes. If there's funding available, I can get X amount per unit. And it works, it fits the box. And then you don't have people trying to get control of the site. And they don't know if it's even or.
Yes, I mean, the thing I would love for us to have time to talk about next time is, so this is obviously a specific and targeted solicitation. It probably makes sense to have a process that is sort of an open, off-cycle rolling solicitation. And Elizabeth, to your point, like there is like, or Emily, sorry. There is probably a way to essentially create a container around if you're coming in off-cycle, here's what you need to provide.
Just a quick question as far as kind of process. So we all got these packages. Some of these packages are a couple hundred pages long, and a lot of them you know, have some very nice photos and details about, you know, prior projects and this, that, the other thing. But eventually it all comes down to numbers and whether the numbers that are being proposed by the applicant or the numbers of.
Numbers and outcomes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
how do we all get on the same page as far as numbers go? Because I could look at a project, Clay could look at a project, and we say, oh, well, over, take the base camp, over, well, 10 years, I think this is what it's gonna be, and she's gonna say, no, I think this is what it's gonna be. So neither one necessarily is right or wrong, but is there a way that we're all kind of on the same page when it at least comes to making a recommendation to city council or to anyone?
Being on the same page before you walk in the door on the 28th, about the only way to even approximate that is to really pay attention to the evaluation and ranking score sheet and the RFP criteria. Because you're 8 human individuals with like different perspectives as to what is good, not good. I mean, like that's why you're gonna come together and talk about it. Like, I would not, if you had 7 in front of you, the full 7, like the reality that you would all walk in the door with like, this is 1 through 7, that's never gonna happen. So that you talk about it.
And Brad,
Go ahead, David.
Sorry.
yeah, I would just add on, I mean, I think at this, so you're all around the table because you bring different types of expertise. So some of you are gonna like really focus on the numbers, others of you are gonna maybe look more at the community benefit outcomes or levels of affordability. So that's the purpose of the conversation on the 28th, is to bring your different perspectives. I think on the numbers piece in particular, it's kind of at this point, like, does it pass the sniff test? Like, do those numbers just seem off base? They don't make sense? Or, yeah, that looks like they've really thought things through and those are close to what I would expect them to be.
To that
Because
point,
there's a due diligence phase that comes after.
there's gonna be a baton passing to city council, staff, legal, that will essentially kick off a whole nother round of due diligence, right? So like, the sniff test is a perfect way to describe it. I mean, that's why I sort of found myself saying investable or not investable. You know, I mean, and I know that's like, even where that line is can maybe be a little bit difficult to arrive at. But like, I think that's kind of how the group should be thinking at. And to Emily's earlier point, that's when you communicate to us as staff, as this continues, keep this in mind. Like as you initiate something that feels like real negotiation for a project that's proposed, these are the types of things that we feel like you ought to really be digging into.
Are we
Go ahead.
gonna submit, the recommendation as a whole, like one as a group? Is
Yes.
that right?
Yep.
That's, yeah.
That's the hope. I mean, if there was member of the group who's like, I don't think that should be the number one. I think my perspective, Brad, we haven't talked about this, is that we would capture that and communicate that along with the full group recommendation. So if the majority felt this should be the number one, but someone said, I really don't think that should be the number one because I think we need to focus on X instead.
And it's funny, Todd sent me a question this morning that, I mean, I responded to him about that, like, planning commission is a really good example, right? Planning commission is gonna take a vote on something and recommend something to city council, and it may be 5-2, and council will see the minutes. So that's the reason we're doing minutes. So like I mean, you don't have to formally sort of express dissent. I mean, it will be in the minutes, right? So it will capture if there was a clear number one, there was a plurality, but maybe generally consensus around a number 2, but like there was a really close number, they will see that in the minutes. So I mean, you know, but when we get to that point, we can talk about this. I mean, say that clearly, like if we get to the point where like it feels like the group is making a decision, you want to sort of note something for to the minutes, like you should vocalize that in the meeting next time.
So we have an opinion collectively and individually.
Yes.
Good,
sir.
I apologize, I didn't read the proposals yet. And I don't know if this is part of it, but is part of the proposal or any part of the RFP, what happens if these projects aren't funded? Like, will we know if, say the childcare and workforce housing isn't one of our top recommendations? does it say anywhere in there like, well, we're moving forward anyway? You know, I don't know if that matters.
Well,
That could be a criteria, maybe.
I just don't know if that matters to anybody else,
Well,
but
the
for like
Youth
some of these
Valley
things.
housing one, does have a,
Yeah,
if
said
it's
that.
not funded, this is what's gonna happen, I don't
Right.
think anything else.
I think that's a
And
fair
then I
point.
think just knowing how long people at the city have been working on that particular project, whether this funding happens or not, they're moving forward.
Yeah, and I don't want to like put my personal opinions on things like that, so I didn't know if that's something we would know, or we're just supposed to be like, it doesn't matter.
Can we ask for clarification if the
Yeah,
project doesn't, if there's some that maybe
It
don't
was on
say
this
what happens
list.
otherwise?
I think that's a clarifying question you can ask. I mean, I will, this is just, I will admit this is like my own sort of personal thing. When it comes to RFPs, particularly where like you were evaluating a written response, like I'm a stickler. It's like 25 years has just made me like an absolute stickler of like, you're evaluating what's on the page.
Right.
I've had so many occasions where like, I know this is a better project than what they wrote, but like I have to evaluate what's in front of me. And so you may hear a little bit of that from me. That's not really to your point, Sarah, but like, I mean, that's, I think the type of thing that the group is gonna have to sort of just wrestle with the reality of like, what you know is in front of you.
So, yeah. So we may not know if, you know, we don't,
Well, I mean,
will it happen or will it just be funded in a different?
and what, the way I would encourage this group to think is maybe slightly different than that, is does your investment actually make the project a reality?
Right. Yeah, I guess that's
Flip
kind
it-
of what
flip
I'm
it that way.
asking, like, if they didn't get this money, would it happen, or they're like, well,
I mean,
the
and for-
affordable part's not happening?
yes, I mean, there could be a version they could get the money, but the project still may not happen.
And they might be in the proposals. like I said.
Yeah, you're totally, you're good.
I'm gonna read them.
Well, it seems that if a project has this funding gap, a potential funding gap, we aren't gonna be getting into those details, those level of details today in order to go back to the proposal originator or developer, or whatever you wanna say, to say, hey, what, can you fill this gap in before the 28th? When we're gonna make a final recommendation? Is that an opportunity, or it doesn't seem like that's going to be an opportunity?
Yeah, so for that project, I mean, there is a clarifying question that could be something along the lines of, did they request 10? And it still leaves them 10 short, am I remembering that
Yeah.
right? Like, what's the reality of, if you're awarded these funds by the end of the year, that you will
Right.
find the other 10?
And it's a short discussion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, one more question. Should we just assume that these projects are, you know, have gone through planning and are good to go?
Most of the proposals will mention that, and the summary talks about it a little bit, some are entitled, some are not.
Okay.
So that is a project that sort of has an entitlements sort of schedule, but they have not, come through, development.
There's a wide range, yeah, so that's definitely a determining factor.
Right.
Someone-
Even if you got money.
Yep.
like, I might struggle with it.
We'll see that.
So I'm gonna transition now to like really what we need to do today, is that okay? So again, I want you to have sort of clarity of charge. And again, I wanna make sure you sort of have the tools that you need. And I wanna make sure if there are clarifying questions that you like, feel like you're ready to ask. David and I and Avery and I can sort of document them and start the process to get written responses from respondents on those. I don't know if the word clarifying is like obscenity and pornography and you just simply kind of know it. Because much like my stickler thing, like I don't necessarily, my opinion is like, this is not the opportunity to have someone rewrite their proposal. It's clarifying something that was provided in the proposal to make sure you have the best understanding of what they're proposing. You know, but I think, you know, there's probably some license there to color maybe a little bit outside of that, but I would sort of keep that in mind. So, and I'll maybe finish with like just things that will happen after today, just so that everybody has a full picture. Today we talked about clarifying questions. I have essentially in the memo given everyone, I mean, I've written that you have until Friday noon, I think, to tell me If you have additional clarifying questions, if you spend a little bit of time with any of the proposals today, when we talk about clarifying questions, I'm gonna look for like consensus head nods from the group, like, yep, I think we'd love to hear that. Anything that comes in that's directly to me, unfortunately, I'm gonna probably be the arbiter there. And I'm gonna play that, like, is this really clarifying? And so you may suggest to me in writing a question that you would ask that I feel like is something other than a clarifying question, which is just, no, it's gonna be a judgment call on my part. So I will get all, I will essentially get all the questions out. I will give them a deadline of the 22nd, which is Thursday. And then turn around and give you all written responses to those clarifying questions on Friday the 23rd. And obviously, like, it's running up against the 28th, but hopefully, like, the main line of the proposal, like, you've already like had a chance to sit with, and clarifying is just simply additive to your understanding. And then the other thing I would just mention, and this is noted in the in the staff memo, but the working assumption has been no presentations from applicants. If you find yourself feeling like that is really something you absolutely positively need, part of that was to move as quick as we possibly could. If you find yourself feeling that you really do want that, we'll just have to figure out how to make it happen. So sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes you really just hear what you saw in the proposal all over again. So I'm open to this group, and before we leave today, you should do your best to communicate to me like, no, I kind of feel like we might want to be thinking about presentations. I don't want to rule it out because it can be helpful. So that we can sort of walk you through the summary sheet. We can do whatever is helpful for the group to, again, help you sort of understand what's in front of you, understand sort of the evaluation sheet. The evaluation sheet is really simple, but it's also asking, always think back to going back to that RFP, and there's much more context within that in terms of what those sort of 4 scoring criteria actually means. If we need to talk about that, if we need to revise that evaluation sheet, which is probably like attachment 2 or something. I feel like I've said enough, and I want to like pause for a second and make sure, help us understand what you need. Or if you have more questions, we can talk about questions as well.
Could I give you an example question?
Yeah.
See if that's
Yeah.
something that's kind of in the ballpark of what we're talking about.
For like a
real question
Yes.
from one of these proposals.
Yes.
So again, like everyone else, it's kind of rushed reading through it, but Yampa Valley Housing Authority, they're obviously very good at putting together proposals like this. It's well done. There's got a lot of information in there and stuff. What I didn't see in there is the city is contributing a bunch of money. The Yampa Valley Housing Authority is contributing a bunch of money. The owner developer is contributing at most, it looks like about $100,000. So to me, that's like a non-starter unless the owner slash developer is going to put up a very viable completion guarantee, if not a completion guarantee and a repayment guarantee, because otherwise they've got no skin in the game. And I mean, we could sit around here and put together $100,000 if the city would give us $10 million and the piece of land in the middle of the city. So, things like that. Would that
that feels like a clarifying question to me, because they have laid that out in their proposal, and you're,
Dropping that
Yes.
portion of the sources.
Yes.
Which is,
I think that is totally in the ballpark of what we have to follow. Yes.
As a committee member, I think that's a great clarifying question.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, because part of that was, right, seeing the head nods, right?
Yeah,
We as a
yeah.
committee agree that that is a pertinent clarifying question.
I think it
Can
would,
I,
Yeah, and David, if you should, if we get to sort of head nods, I think it'd be good for you essentially to repeat back so that like.
well, that's what I have a clarifying question about the clarifying question. Do we want to have the committee members give us in writing what their clarifying question is, or based on this, we could reflect back what we heard, what we think we heard, and ask you to confirm it before we send it out?
The latter is what I would suggest.
So I should.
No. David, do you want to take a shot at what Bill's question was? Or Bill, you want to say it again?
It's not the best audio, I'll just say
No.
up front, but I think the question is focused on what is the developer, so Lone Tree Trust, what's their financial participation in this? And is there the potential for a guarantee of completion? What happens if there's not completion of the project to the city's funds in particular? Is that accurate? Something like that?
I would probably be a little bit more direct than that.
Okay.
I think for me, the question was, why in proposal one, do they have a significant equity contribution? But then in this proposal, there is
Ah.
virtually zero.
Yeah.
Why are they getting out of that?
Gotcha.
I can get my questions, but I think that's the question is, why have they dropped their equity contribution in this while the city is putting in 10?
You bet, David?
Yeah.
I'll send you a bullet point if you
Yeah,
want.
I think we got it, yeah.
And I think because they had so much detail that it brought up a lot more questions, there was also a return of equity for the land contribution for the housing authority. But I believe the land was donated,
Mhm.
right? So.
Yeah.
And, sorry, there was it said a split. So in this proposal, it shows an exit in a few years. And then there's a split between housing authority and the developer, but it didn't say what that split was. I think that.
Brad, would it be helpful if we just talk through each one of these, one of the proposals, broad outline for everybody, and then sort of get people's immediate clarifying questions, understanding you can go ahead after this and think about it for a couple more days and send things in. But
Yeah, that sounds good.
yeah,
Yeah.
just want to make sure everyone around the table has an understanding of each of the projects as we talk through people's questions. So should we start with the Cottonwoods?
Yeah. sounds good.
YBHA, Mid Valley. So just, you want me to do it or you want to do it, Brad?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, so this is YBHA in partnership with Lone Tree Trust. It's essentially phase 2 of a project that's already underway, so they have full entitlements. There's building that's already completed or being completed that includes 86 deed restricted for sale condos that are serving about 100 to 140% AMI. They have 2 additional buildings that would be phase 2 that this proposal relates to. Both are currently planned to be rental buildings that would be deed restricted rental units. One has 63 units, one has 87 units. The proposal is that with the addition of city funding of $10 million, $5 million for one building and $5 million for the other, they would be able to convert one of the buildings from being a rental, it's the 63 unit building, to being a for sale, affordable condo development. So that'd be 63 for sale units serving people at 90 to 140% AMI. And they have a table in their proposal. I put in the summary sheet, page 8 of it gives like a column that says, here's what you'd be getting if the city doesn't put any money in. And here's what you'd get on the rental and on the for sale product if the city puts money in. It breaks it out by unit type and level of affordability. So one would be a for sale unit, for sale units, otherwise it would be rental if we don't put money into it. And the second building would still be rental, but they would buy down the AMIs, the area median income targets, to a lower level than what would otherwise happen without the city participation. So that has 87 rental units. The buy down would bring it down to serving 80 to 120%. Otherwise, it'd be serving up to 140% AMI. So it's not a huge drop in the AMI, but a bit of a drop down to the 80% level on some of the units. So $5 million to each of those. comes to, they do the calculation in their financial detail, 66,000 or so per door to get those outcomes. They would be deed restricted in perpetuity as a YVHA project. They would be managing those units. People who are heirs of the ownership units would be capped on how much they could realize in terms of appreciation. They'd take some appreciation out, but the unit would remain affordable and be sold again at that AMI level to the next buyer. And they highlight some other key features related to sustainability, the location of the project. It'd be all electric, energy efficient, some EV chargers. Yeah, that's the project. I had a few questions I had, and we'll add the ones, and if there's others, we can capture them now. But I'd be curious to hear from them whether this is an all or nothing proposal, or could we fund 5 million for one of the sides of the project, one as the for sale or the down. I'd be curious to hear if there's a to get into lower than 80% AMI, or if this project is specifically to serve 80% and above. Because we've identified in our needs analysis that 60% AMI is the highest need area. And they also are applying for a state grant, about 2.7 million that they won't know about till later this year, and what happens, what would be the impact of not getting that grant. So those are just a couple of questions that were front of mind as I was going through it. But we'll capture the other ones and maybe just pause for conversation. Understand we're not evaluating them now. We're just sort of making sure we understand it.
Again, I feel bad asking questions because I haven't read their proposals, but obviously I'm not a developer. Why is it more expensive for them to do for sale rather than the rent? Like, why do they need money to convert it to for sale?
Costs money to subdivide, but that's something that can be done.
And there's a one-time transaction.
Yeah,
versus-
exactly,
Yeah.
versus a rental stream.
Okay, so like the long, over the long term. you
Yeah,
make
so
more
if you
money
sell a house,
renting?
maybe you make whatever percentage you do off your cost of investment.
Typically,
But if
two
you have a-
comparable units, one
Mhm.
rental, one owner, the subsidy for the owner is gonna be higher. For that lack of
Yeah,
sort of
you
cash
might
flow.
have 20 years of cash flow
Right.
from, from
But I
the
think
rental.
it's also important to know that we're giving up $5 million in state money that I think can only be used for rentals to do this as well. So I think the STR $5 million is replacing that on the for sale housing.
Just a general question, but it does relate to this as well as all the other projects. Are we gonna have some kind of say or ability to ask questions as far as what the, I'm just gonna call them applicants, what the applicants are doing as far as their bank financing? Because we're basically kind of providing equity. They may have some of their own equity, but we're providing equity. And so it's very important, I think, that say Lone Tree goes into default with their senior lender. Are we gonna have an intercreditor agreement between the city and the lender? So at least we get notification that they're in default and we can start, will we have remedies that we can start pursuing and that kind of thing. So what will our connection be to the other parties that are financing this transaction? Because if the S hits the fan, everyone's gonna look out for themselves. The first one to the trough is gonna be the one that gets the payback. So you don't want to be in the dark.
Yeah, so this is where like essentially you're gonna pass the baton to council, and there will be a very real sort of digging in on the risk side of things then to make sure the deal is structured in such a way that you feel like, you know, the risk reward is where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think this committee is focused more on theory than mechanics. And the mechanics that you accurately depict are resolved by a process that the city has.
But I mean, hopefully, like, you know, again, if you don't see enough here, if you see something here that is like flashing problematic, like, I think this group has the ability to sort of flag those.
Sure.
See, I'm almost seeing in reverse, like the city council, you know, has an overarching. I'm working on it too, the
Yeah.
community canvas,
Yeah.
right? There's big goals and stuff here. But I don't see the city council drilling down to, you know,
Look, we have legal staff too, I mean, like, council supported by staff, like, I understand there's plenty of supports there to help them, in that process.
I look at that also as, I think, a loan as compared to a grant has a little bit different of a, call it stickiness of the city's continued involvement in that project. So just to add a little bit, because I do have that concern, you're basically giving people money. And if an equity holder does go bankrupt, there's a real good chance that that money's gone. So if you're in a lender position, as you know, that puts you in a totally different place.
It's on the default, one of the few things that will trigger thanks for the nice deed restrictions, but we're done. And I think that's one of the few things that can unwind deed restrictions.
It does, but that wouldn't, at least my, not knowing the legalities of it, that would be the benefit to the owner of the deed restricted unit.
Right.
How it would affect a deed restricted rental unit, I have no idea, but definitely from an owner, yeah, because we've seen that on several places back in 2009, 10, and 11.
I have a pragmatic question for the group, and that is rental units, whole ownership. It's just that simple. Is one superior to another in the environment that we're attempting to address?
Well, I have a follow-up to that, which is the needs study. Is it accurate? Is it updated? What are we, I mean, do we understand really what we need correctly? Because I think that would bear on what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Do we need revenue?
I mean, I think anecdotally, people in the community say they want to own
Right.
homes. But, you know, I think one of our goals on the outset here was to produce new affordable units. So this is converting of the type of unit that should be built one way or another.
That's where I was going, is it seems like these 150 units are gonna come on market regardless. And what the proposal is we're gonna convert 63 of them to whole ownership. That's really and I get it, they're gonna lower the AMI basis, and that makes sense. But really, the theory is, if we're solely focused on bringing new units to market, this doesn't accomplish that goal.
Unless you were distinguishing rent versus
That's
own.
exactly.
Totally agree. The other question, kind of piggyback on both of yours, is that what void is the YDHA filled in the last 3 years, 4 years, as they brought these projects on? Have they been more focused on rental? Have they been more focused on ownership?
100%.
100% rental?
Yeah, this is.
Okay, that's what I thought.
This is their first percent project.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
And just Steve, to your, I mean, I will say this specific RFP, I think sort of paints a picture that there probably is a pipeline of units that with some additional public subsidy could actually bring more public benefit, right? So I think this notion of going from an idea to a unit is not really what this RFP was about. It was like, oh, no, someone is actually like, has units in the pipeline or maybe even constructed that with this public subsidy could either bring an ownership product to market that has not been easy to bring and or bring deeper affordability.
Because I think that'll be your community benefit lens.
Right.
You know, from like a workforce upper management. It's like you want people to be able to buy and, you know, create wealth for themselves and then eventually maybe sell that and move up.
That's.
But are these ownership units doing that because they're deed restricted, so that you can't really gain equity in
You know,
these units?
3% of
Right.
something is better than 3% of nothing.
Unless inflation is higher than the 3% that you're.
I feel like we're trying to get into like something that feels like an evaluation thing.
Yeah.
Isn't part of the mandate delivering this as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
It seems like delivering four rent units is a much easier process than going through the whole for sale process, but that's an uneducated opinion. But, you know, based on these proposals, not to skip ahead, but, you know, you got base camp out there, it's already built. You throw some money in there to lower the rents, you got your affordable housing uses tomorrow, if you want.
So to that, unless anyone has clarifying questions on the Mid Valley, that we haven't talked about, I say we go to the next one. And David, you want to just do a quick thumbnail of the base camp one, just so
Sure.
that, yeah.
To the point, yeah, so this is an example of a built project. The owner has said, hey, we could reduce the rents, however many you want. They've suggested up to 20 for a 20-year period, but it sounds like they're pretty flexible as to what the term would be and how many units. But basically buy down the rent from market rate to an affordable level. They give some examples in their proposal. They don't give a specific ask. They just say, hey, let's talk and tell us what you'd like and figure it out. They have a table, it's referenced in the summary, that shows what the average market rent is. One of my clarifying questions would be, is that what they're charging at the lofts, or are they charging somewhere above or below market? I don't know. And so then they have that in the delta, and I did just some really like obvious easy math of like multiply doing the 80% AMI for 20 years or 20 units, and it comes to, what was it, $350,000. That's with no rent increase. Another question, a clarifying question I would have for them, like, those are just some guideline numbers. Would there be a bulk discount because we're doing 20 of them and doing a master lease for 20 units for 20 years, which takes a little bit of headache out of property management for them? And is there openness to something where we negotiate a price and they'd be deed restricted in perpetuity? Because part of this, part of this proposal is you give the money, you buy down the rent, but once you stop giving money to buy down the rent goes back up to market rate. Unlike the first project, which would be deed restricted in perpetuity because it's owned and operated by a nonprofit.
And back to that master lease comment, I mean, if in effect what we're doing is de-risking their project, right? Because they've gone out with their own pro forma, their own internal accounting and said, okay, we're gonna make $5,000 in rent per unit. Well, maybe the market's not $5,000 in rent, maybe it's 3,000. If we can convince the city that it's 5,000, then we've got $2,000. We know we're gonna be 100% occupied because the tenant's only gonna be paying 3,000. The rest of the money's gonna come from the city. So we know at least that number of units is gonna be 100% occupied.
I've had this conversation with the council. No one is gonna submit a proposal that's not a win for them. Like that should just be an accepted fact, that there is some benefit to the proposer here as to what the subsidy offers them. And you're pointing to like the obvious one for this one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I guess my point is there should be a vote.
Sure, yeah.
I'd be interested what their current occupancy rates are.
Okay.
They are high.
At least out.
Okay.
Just, I mean, not talking out of school, but
Yeah, I
they,
just-
I think,
Okay.
um,
I think we could probably keep it confidential if you want, but I think we should see the actual.
Rents.
rental
Yeah.
rents.
I didn't hear that last part, sorry.
Just rent rolls.
Yeah,
Ask,
Okay.
and I think the question is, are they interested in, you know, in perpetuity, would they consider perpetuity? Or,
They mentioned in perpetuity, I mean, they mentioned that as a possibility, right, David? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, their proposal is really like, let's have a conversation and we'll work something out, which is great. I mean, that's fine. It just makes it a little harder to evaluate apples and apples. But
I mean,
we can ask some clarifying questions that give us a little better information.
I mean, I'm hesitant to like predict sort of council's view of this conversation, but I can't imagine that we would walk in the door at 20 years and they would be supportive. They're gonna want to see something a longer period of affordability. Just conversations we've had so far, that's my prediction. So take that with a large grain of salt. Anything else on that one? I mean, they obviously just sort of gave us an open proposal. I mean, there are pluses and minuses that come with that. David, you do the next one?
Well, I,
Okay.
just as far as rents go, that's a perfect question. And it would be nice to see either month over month, so you know if rents are going up, rents are going down, you know, what's the trend
I
of
think
the
the
rents.
concessions down, I mean.
Yeah, are the rent concessions being involved.
Yeah.
You know, is it really a 12-month lease or is it a 13-month lease to describe, you know? In the form of a 12-month lease.
Yeah. You can tell that,
Okay.
David?
I think so.
Okay.
You're recording this, right? This is the city
Yeah, yeah,
Zoom,
yeah.
so yeah, okay.
Avery's typing away, man. He's got you.
Avery's typing away. I'm trying to, yeah.
But we ask about the financial feasibility of the developer or the development. Is it fair to ask for a P&L on this project?
Ask each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing more telling if we've got rent, we got occupancy rates, and we got a P&L.
Right.
And you're gonna read financial feasibility pretty quick.
Yeah, and as you just said, right? No one's submitting a proposal without self-interest. And so a P&L should be supportive of their project rather than detractor of their project.
And at this point, to me, you can ask for something and they can opt not to deliver it. And
If it was a project that was currently in the design phase, that's exactly what we would be asking for as a P&L. So why would we not be asking for it even though it's already
Yep.
ground up?
Okay. Should we go to the next one?
Do it.
I'm going to go to childcare and workforce housing. So this is a very different kind of project. This is not built and not currently entitled, although because the state's involved, they don't really have to go through the local entitlement process, but they plan to go through on a courtesy basis. It's a partnership between the city, the county, and the state. It would create a new childcare facility with, I think, 3 floors of housing above it. In total, there'd be 28 units of housing for childcare workers specifically, and 8 units of housing for CDOT's snowplow drivers. So we'd expect, they don't really present it the same way like the YVHA proposal in terms of AMIs being served, but they do have some data they provide related to what childcare workers make, and they would expect that most of these folks would be in the 60 to 80% AMI level. With a guarantee that they would not be paying more than 30% of their income on housing. This is the one that has a lot of attachments. I don't think you need to go through all of them unless you're curious to see the site plan and the architecture and everything else. That added a lot to our page count of your packets, but the front part describes sort of, they're asking for funding from the city. They have a number of other funders. Even if the city approves 10 million in funding, which was their ask, they would not have their entire capital stack in place to do the project. So I had a clarifying question, like what happens if you're not successful? Like what are your no-go milestones that you're looking at? They have a project timeline that says they will be submitting for entitlements this fall. I hope to have the entitlements and the wetland permit here or beginning of next year. But again, they don't have a detailed pro forma that they shared or have to share, is my understanding. So it's really sort of investing in the idea as a good faith partner, which would help them potentially raise the additional funds. But it's a different kind of proposal than the first two we talked through.
I guess one question I would have is it written in the short-term rental language, that short-term rental money can be used for mixed-use project like this? Because are we gonna bifurcate the amount of money that we would give them solely for the apartment units on top of the childcare? Or, I mean, I don't know how you do that.
the ballot language only allows that to be invested in housing.
Or
Or, yeah, but that supports that, yes.
So,
I don't have a question, but the observation is this is such a targeted group. It just strikes me as it's very, very focused. The group that it's going to be addressing is such a focused group as opposed to what we came in here to do. That's my comment.
and I'm not like gonna recuse myself on this, because I don't think I can facilitate this meeting, but I'm probably gonna be a little quiet, because obviously the city's name is on this proposal.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me it got submitted, but still, like, I don't wanna like feel like I'm biasing the conversation.
Sorry, I forget, but where's the 20 million identified coming from?
It's like Route County, it's like
It's already there.
county, you guys,
The state.
state, and several other grants.
And is the city already in for a certain amount and this would replace where it's coming from?
No.
It does it say that? Again, I'm sorry.
But this currently has a 21 million shortfall, right? 20's funded, 21 million short, 10 of the 21, right? So they'd still be 11 short.
CDOT's covering themselves. They're paying for their own.
Right.
So again, I want to get into evaluation of their proposal today. But are there clarifying questions? I mean, again, I've got sort of what happens if you don't get the additional funding. What happens if you don't meet your project delivery? What's the city likelihood the city could get its money out if things don't move forward? And what are the commitments they have to the other funding partners? Those funds.
And have they explored any debt to cover? I don't think that was it. But it sounds
There
like
was a
there's not
sense in
gonna
there
be
that said that they wanted to, they were hoping to have it
have no
debt
interest.
free.
Could they bond under the city for any balance? And would the city even do that?
That, they popped up yesterday in council, that they call it cradle to grave, so Casey's on one end, Jimmy John Kerr on the other, basically, would they put a ballot measure on to try and hold a ballot levy? It could support this kind of project, so.
And there have been conversations in the past about bonding against the actual STR tax revenue.
Yeah.
So I've heard that literally used.
Right. And at the time, it was like, we haven't done enough collections, like, it was gonna be a really risky proposition, so it really makes sense, but,
It requires a vote.
and that, yeah. Thank you.
Should we go to the next one?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Again, quite a different type of proposal. This is the Agra hood. So they call it a revolving door Agra hood. It's a different concept related to just housing in general. The idea is there would be 23 tiny cabin duplex homes, so 46 units in total, integrated with some agricultural uses, so some food production on site, sort of being participating in an ecological community. The idea is that they would sell 36 of the units that would help fund the project development. 10 of the units would be available for rent, and a portion of people's rental payments would go into an equity fund that would help them save money for a down payment to then move into. It's not clear. They could potentially move into an ownership unit on site or just move into an ownership situation elsewhere in the community. Or maybe it's a rent to own proposal. I'm not entirely clear. Maybe they become a ability to buy the unit that they're in. There are some things that it's probably the most conceptual of all of them. They do not have entitlements. They don't have control of the site. They do have a site they identify as being option one for them. Yeah, they have a timeline that would say, it says that they would be move-in ready in 34 months. But that assumes sort of a rezoning process and other things.
Tell me to shut up.
No.
I'll just sort of one other thing highlight of this is one where they are asking for 5 million, and they're saying that at the sale of the units, the city would get 3.6 million back. And I'm just conveying to you what it says. I'm not evaluating anything at this time.
And this is not within the city limits, but it is within the urban growth boundary, so. And this one.
I think it is in the city.
Yeah, I think
Is it?
it's the bloody legend.
Oh.
It's just zoned
It's right on the
industrial.
edge,
It's
like-
zoned industrial.
Okay, thank you.
It's that, you know where the gun range is?
Uh-huh.
It's that building a little bit, it used to be a junkyard, like.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
it's like the jet hills that snow
Yeah.
places out for a little bit.
Yeah.
The road curves and it sort of
And then
follows
K or
the.
whatever.
sort of-
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have the farm on top and then it
Yeah,
cascades down.
okay.
Sorry, Bill, sorry, that's,
I was just gonna say, like, kind of as a term, I guess, in banking, but as a general rule, like, I don't want to go to school with the developer. Meaning, this guy hasn't done this kind of project before, it's a new concept for him in particular, he hasn't done, it's a new concept to begin with for probably everyone at the table, but had he done 50 of these prior, that would mean something, but.
you're evaluating right now.
So the question is, do they elaborate on their ability to deliver?
And
And I think a basic question we can ask is, what, do you have options besides this $5 million? Where can you go? How else would you like that?
And they're targeting this parcel of land, does that mean, like, do they have any sort of agreement, verbal agreement, does it, anything, does the owner of this land know that they're targeting? Where is it at there?
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, to be clear, sorry, that's my clarifying question.
Okay.
Is there any site control?
Yes, thank you.
Site control.
I don't know how to say that concisely, but you got it.
This is a just so you know, this is a conversation I had that I was trying to shut down as quick as I could and sending him to the questions. I mean, it was clear like he had done a little bit of sort of site assessment. I didn't know in that conversation whether like there was an actual site in mind or they were just simply exploring.
Mhm.
But that was also like 10 days before this was due, so clearly there was a site that was front of mind. But there is, to your point, if there's more than just that.
Yeah.
Clarifying question, is the escrow individually escrowed or is it a group escrow? And is it truly an escrow? Is it separate from the entity itself? So if something were to happen, these people would potentially get their money back?
Right.
And also in mortgage lending, have they clarified that source of funds will actually help them qualify for a mortgage because source of funds is a critical piece in the mortgage qualification process. And so they may go through this whole process and not have qualified down payment funds for purchasing a house.
And there was $10,000-$15,000 is what they were looking to.
Yep.
Accumulate for down payment for a house, so.
Which is possible because you can get 3% down loans in Steamboat, anywhere in the country. Actually, you can get 0 down loans. But there's a lot of different down payment assistance funds that you can capitalize on that, especially is in addition to mortgage insurance. But the key thing is that if you even have 10 to 15,000 down, the mortgage company may not consider it as a down payment. It may not qualify you under Fannie Freddie standards.
Okay. Anything else?
All we got left is the easy one.
Okay, yeah, the least complicated one of all. Casey's Pond. Again, a very different kind of proposal. So this is Casey's Pond, existing senior care facility with several different types of housing built in, from skilled nursing care to independent living and some workforce units. Brad can fill in the blanks in terms of council's conversation of last night and today about the workforce units. But essentially, they're looking to quickly put together a collaborative proposal with a number of community partners to acquire the site and save it as senior housing. Yeah, it's
Well, they're kind of trying to carve out a piece of the fee to be there and say that goes towards housing and that's an AMI target.
yeah. Yeah, they have, so a lot of seniors who are in the units today are on Medicaid, so it's serving a fairly low AMI due to the Medicaid supplements. There's 153 total units. They're in a 90-day closure process. The purchase price is 25 to 28 million. They're asking for 10 million.
It's kind of a clarifying question would be Dan Foote. I mean, he seemed to indicate it's pretty prescribed how you can use those fund.
For
And he thought-
STR?
Yeah, and he thought it would play poorly with Medicaid. And that was just, a one-off comment, but I think that's an important question.
Sure, so I will add what David was alluding to, and Rebecca can help with this a little bit. So obviously, council talked about this last night, actually continued the meeting today, and essentially passed an ordinance committing, I think is a fair word, $2.5 million of short-term rental tax funds, very specifically to support the 15 workforce units. But this is, I mean, that is outside of this process. That is, I mean, this group should not consider that an end run. You still have a proposal that's come in from this group requesting $10 million. That 2.5 is kind of its own separate thing.
But is it? From my
From a straight procurement standpoint, like, and.
Should we look at it in a regulatory way?
Right, but is it the same, did we just commit to them, we as in the, we here commit to $2.5 million to this group who also put in a proposal for $10 million?
Yes.
Just separately?
Yes. Yes.
Christian, that makes sense.
Maybe.
What, yeah, fair, yes.
Because I wasn't there, so I actually was coming from the community commission, I don't know what. I don't think it's.
It's essentially a commitment to a new ownership.
It's a commitment of city funding for the purpose of trying to leverage private funding for some new ownership group. This is a specific proposal from Capella, who's also trying to leverage community dollars and city STR dollars. So it's similar, but I don't think what the action that council took this morning replaces this proposal. I think if that path is potentially successful, it doesn't mean Capella's the new owner or the operator.
So do we sort of pretend there's no rules around the funding and evaluate on its merits?
No, you
Okay.
do not pretend that, yes, you,
There are rules.
there are rules.
Well, I mean,
And so, I mean, just so that,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the
Yes.
rules, that's my point. But,
so this is the sort of e-conversation that Todd and I had this morning, I mean,
and I have some stake in it, my pencil application.
Yeah,
I would want
yeah,
to see consistency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
hard
Yeah.
with this.
And maybe a clarifying question is, should a deed restriction be required on the property? Would that negatively affect their ability to operate? Right, because, I mean, that would be my fear is if we put deed restrictions on people who live there, then they can't operate in that. In some situation.
yep.
To the P and L comment before, this place has been running. Why hasn't it been paying any interest?
So I've had a couple conversations offline with people about the bond issuance. COVID had an effect, occupancy rates leading into COVID and coming out of COVID. Anybody's had anything to do with bond issuance? They're typically, those projections are at the very high end cap, and they didn't hit those projections. So that I think is part of the financial reason, which I totally agree with, that we should get some financials. But I also think that there's another clarifying question in regards to the management and or board structure of this organization, because I can understand how they got into a bad financial position, but knowing this for so many years, how did it get to the point that it got to before they started putting their hand up and asking for help?
Totally agree.
So that to me is an oversight issue, and I think oversight needs to be changed if the city's gonna put money in to a project like this.
That would be the clarifying question is what is the future plans for management / administration?
What's the ownership group?
Yeah.
This is the group that's,
They're the current.
they are the current.
Right.
No, they're the current operator.
Oh, they're the
Well,
current.
They're not the current owner.
Oh.
Christian,
The owners of the-
but it's a subsidiary.
It is, yes. it is.
Okay.
Yeah, them.
There are, but because it's a public bond, there are
Yep.
public financials and they have never made a mortgage.
Right.
That's what I understand. Yeah.
990.
And so who's gonna own Casey's Pond with this money if we give it to them?
Very clarifying question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, is the
What's the
same
en-
owner's gonna own
What's
it?
the
Are
entity?
we just gonna
Yeah.
give them money then?
Or would they be interested in a loan with very favorable terms that allows the city to maintain a level of interest in the property?
Band-Aid on.
Not necessarily, it could be it could be a 0% interest loan, it could be a 1%, it could have a very long AM on it, it could have triggers associated with hitting specific targets as opposed to a very structured AM table. And there's a lot of ways that they could structure anything when you're putting together your own promissory note, as opposed to going to public bonding.
What I mean is it gives them some time to get their act together, because it seems like time is the enemy.
And if they don't hit specific targets, maybe the city has leverage to make something happen.
David, you feel like you got those?
Yeah, I think we got those.
Actually, their proposal does say that they would be owned by the same entity.
That's what it says. It says CLC would be the,
It would remain a nonprofit legal entity under the Christian Living Community Nonprofit Care Organization.
And CLC was the original, has been the owner manager for
15 CLC subsidiary is the
I think they came in later. I don't think they were the original operators.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
there was a transition. I'd have to look at the date. But I remember there was I have a father-in-law's on there from my family. There was a definite transition from the letter and used to the group. Brad goes right in. The guy who came, anyway, I'm pretty sure they are not the original operators.
yeah,
I think you're right.
yeah, the investment of city funds would be a key component of funds needed to purchase Casey's CLC along with others. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I think you're right. It looks like some other entity was the original.
So I was thinking about our conversation earlier, email, right, in regards to the legality in STR funds. Can we put this back to them as a clarifying question to have them research as to whether or not they believe STR funds can be utilized for this purpose?
I think they were trying to make the point that they thought they could because they were trying to tie the portion of the fee to an AMI. But I don't know if that's.
Which I think is difficult because when the majority of your residents are on fixed income.
That's mainly in this is, I think that's mainly in the skilled care, it's mainly in Medicaid.
Okay,
And like,
okay.
third or half of those beds, something like that. I think the rest of it's kind of all common. But I am no expert.
They make a case in their proposal that they think that this would be an eligible use. So I think it's kind of a question for the city about when we answer that.
Well, and to that, I mean, Paula, I don't want to like interject my own thoughts here, but like, this notion of like trying to partition the action from today from this proposal, like I think there is a way to try to do that, but at the same time, you could ask a clarifying question that there is an appropriation from council of $2.5 million that for 15 units equates to $166,000 worth of subsidy. How does your proposal change as a result of that?
Right, what do we get for another 10 million?
Yeah,
Sure.
Can I just say it bluntly?
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah,
Right. It would.
or 8.5, or sorry, so.
so that would almost like create the sort of atmosphere where they have to respond and actually sort of equate public subsidy to the unit and its eligibility and sort of what the outcome is that would be different with and without that subsidy, other than keeping it out of receipts.
Was the proposal suggesting that all the units are included as affordable units? Or there's just the 15 staff units? I didn't read it, obviously, I just scanned it. So.
I don't think they really sort of try to outline like line by line what would be considered affordable. The 15 staff units versus Medicaid versus private pay. I mean, they essentially maybe just paint in broad strokes at the community benefit that would come out of this $10 million investment to keep the facility operating.
Gotcha.
That's a skim.
Yeah, I think it's rubbing up against all these points though, is,
Does that count?
right.
I think it can, because it's naturally affordable.
I don't know if it's a clarifying question, but if we were to give them all the money, would the services change? That's a way to reduce expenses, is cut services. So if we're providing more money to.
So the clarifying question could be, what is the proposed service menu after as opposed to
Yeah,
prior.
percent.
Yeah.
Level of service,
Right.
post
And then-
investment.
Yeah, or even like, in their neighborhood sort of
Right,
approach, right? Like, are those neighborhoods going to evolve in some ways in terms of affordability, of the population that they're serving, that sort of thing?
Can I kind of ask a question about how everybody's gonna go about, like, I plan to read everything and then come back with my evaluations
I think
done.
Any other
Okay, yeah.
you're giving us a segue, so I want to make sure everybody's
And
ready for
it's
that.
5:20, it's
Yeah, yeah, no,
5:20.
you're good. Excellent, Sarah. Appreciate it.
So we can
Keep
send
it
you,
good for time.
Yes.
we can send you additional.
Yes.
clarifying.
Noon on Friday, send me clarifying questions. Again, I think we've almost sort of tested what clarifying is
Yeah.
today. Apologies, Bill, for.
Yeah, I'm I got a dictionary.
You gave me a good one first that was like
Yeah.
exactly, and another one like, this feels like evaluation. So you actually helped the group probe in your own lines of inquiry. So yes, by noon on Friday, and then essentially I get those out to folks. Well, my temptation is to actually sort of sit on everything and do it all at once, because there may be clarifying questions that come in between that can be packaged. I don't want to send them something tomorrow and then send them something else again. My job tomorrow with David and Avery's help is to like get the batch that we talked about today finalized, and I will add to it on Friday.
I have a little, piggybacking a little bit more on the clarified questions, is if there was a suite of services that were to change, what would, because I know there's like multiple tiers within these communities, right? What would be impacted? What would be the number of people? So for instance, 10% of the residents are in this level, 25% are in this level, and if they find a certain segment is the least profitable and they're going to cut that, what proportion of the existing population would be impacted by those changes in services? Does that make sense?
Yes, and if I think there's a friendly amendment there. What does that change in, like, what is the timeline that's associated with that change in service? I mean, we're asking for periods of affordability for maybe the more traditional product that we're evaluating. Is it a value just to hear that the service would change year one, but in reality, in year five, they're gonna have to reevaluate sort of how the service is assembled to their overall operating plan? I mean, what's the commitment from that public subsidy that you are gonna maintain the service that you're suggesting would be the result of this investment?
Because there's a huge difference between providing a bed for someone and a meal versus memory care and, around the clock.
And I think that I recall seeing in here, they still have a funding shortfall, is that correct?
Yeah.
13 to 15 million.
And I wonder if they said we anticipate CLC being able to bring an additional 2 million in equity to a purchase. Wonder if that's the this morning.
2 million in equity.
No, I
10 million
think
in
the
debt.
gap that they're speaking of is the gap that they're hoping the community foundation could raise, whether that's low interest loans or donations.
Okay.
Because that's a number that there's no, those dollars are not piled up somewhere.
Mhm.
There's just a hope that there would be.
And the number is different today than would have been yesterday, that would have been
Yes.
the day before, and it would have been, it'll be tomorrow.
Because I think that the proposal, there's a table on page 6 of the proposal, they're saying they would bring 12 million, 2 million in equity, 10 million in debt. That debt is then reflected in the line right below it, which is the Yampa Valley Community Foundation low interest loan. So that there's 12 million, they're asking for 10 million from the city, that gets to 22 million. And then they're counting on 3 to 6 million in private donors, which brings them to the 25 to 28 million potential purchase price.
I guess that would be the question is, where are they on that?
Yeah. Do they have hard
Yeah.
commitments?
Did you hear that, David? Where are they on the private fundraising hard commitments?
Yeah, great.
Sarah?
Sorry.
Segment.
Yeah, I just want us to,
Yeah.
come back prepared. So read everything, come back with our evaluations filled out. My question is, are our 4 criteria also weighted? So are they 1 to 4 or everything is the same?
It's currently the same,
Okay. And then,
other than like the way that we've sort of talked about the financial performance is almost like a hard line
Right, like if we
eligibility
can't do
criteria,
it.
like
Yeah.
If that comes back at a 1, like it's essentially not fundable.
Gotcha. And then on the purpose, like, right, the purpose statement, it says to create affordable or attainable. Are we taking that into account when we're looking at these? If it's not creating something, if it already exists, are you gonna count that, or we're just gonna say it's not part of the 4, so we're not thinking about it?
That's great, even the base camp, I mean.
Right, I would see that as create, I guess, like more Casey's, like if it's there, we could, like, I hate talking about it because it hurts my heart, you know, like I obviously want Casey's to be saved, but I want to use this money for the purpose it was intended.
Yeah, I think that was the question of the IBHA project, and maybe
Right.
it's existing. That's step.
And so I guess.
So
we'll
So I
take
think-
that into account.
yeah, we're gonna obviously roundtable that and we might agree or we might disagree.
Okay. Thank you.
There's creating and there's also preservation, right? I mean, you can almost think of that as a preservation project.
Mhm.
Whereas, I mean, however you want to describe which, I mean,
Yep.
I'm giving you a leap of faith sort of way of viewing it, like you could think of it that way. That
Totally.
absent this investment, those our inventory of
Yep.
workforce units go away.
Will go down.
Yeah.
Yep, you're removing 100 and some units of supply
Mhm.
without knowing where they're going, and that is gonna have a distinct effect.
And at the same time, if city council is back on saving, which is fine, they're probably gonna want $10 million. And what are we doing here?
Yeah, that was
Asking,
my
making
point.
everyone,
That was
you
certainly
know,
my point. Like,
answering questions too. It's a thought that went through my head today. You know.
Say that again?
If city council is bent on coming up with the money to save it, which I think some city council people really express that is number 1 priority today. And that's gonna blow this whole $10 million. We're doing a lot of work here that.
Is this a
will be
fait
for next year, I
Is
guess.
this a fait accompli and we're just, we
Yeah.
should just fold up?
I still think that there's a foundation that we're laying here
Yeah, I mean,
by
yeah,
how
we
we
have another
evaluate
year.
this stuff, so I totally agree. But I still think that there's some value to this group and the things that we're discussing, and maybe providing some vision for future developments and developers, but
Just, city council could have made a decision to appropriate more than $2.5 million today.
sure,
They appropriated $2.5 million.
that's true. Yep, the bucket is large.
And I also think your evaluation and recommendation and comment, like your evaluation of eligibility and like, I mean, 10 million is a lot different from 2.5 million. This proposal, I don't want to get into evaluation, but I don't see where they're promising, there's no we will deed restrict these units or we will guarantee, you know, I mean, like, so I think your evaluation of that proposal would be really is important, and I think it might help council make those decisions.
I mean, and to that, you should be apolitical in your review. Like, you should not be swayed by, I mean, I know we're all human, like, that's hard, like, you have a charge that's essentially evaluating, again, investable, not investable, delivering on the parameters of this RFP to create affordable and attainable units in 1 to 3 years. Stop, full seat, that's it. And, you know, you have a little bit of sort of like, well, what's the risk for, I mean, some of that is sort of going on in the background as well. Like, if something feels like it's outside, this is not the last solicitation that will happen. This is the thing that's in front of us right now, and you're to help council make a decision about essentially an initial tranche of SDR tax funds invested in affordable and attainable housing, right? So pick the best of the best.
I'm just on the evaluation sheet, I'll send you via Brad a new sheet, or actually a set of sheets, because when we did this, we didn't have proposals in, but I'll set it up so you've got the name of each of the projects at the top of the sheet. And I'll also add in some place, not just for a ranking, but for you to put comments on each one of the criteria areas. So it'll look a little bit different, but the categories will be the same. We'll set them up so there's one for each one of the proposals for you to go through. It's just, I would treat it as a place to kind of capture your notes and your thinking. And then on the 28th, we can share that, and that might result in you wanting to make some refinements to what you put in yours as you have the conversation with folks around the table. And then after that would be the sort of collecting of the sheets for the purpose of the procurement process.
And remind, like, you have two proposals that you have not seen that may still
Right.
be fruition. So we will not be able to have a conversation like this. There may be a very narrow window related to, like, do you have clarifying questions? Those proposals may not get the, I mean, we'll have to sort through that because again, there's a deadline on Friday. But if they're suggesting redactions, our legal has to, I mean, it may take a little bit of time. And given that I don't know if you're gonna ever see those, I don't really want to talk, I don't want to share what they potentially would be. But I just don't think we should do that. So just know that is a complicating factor that we're just gonna have to sort of roll with.
Just as far as deliverables go, we're looking on this Friday, any clarifying questions?
Yep.
Okay.
And then my job is to sort of, and then so essentially then you get back next Friday written responses from respondents to your clarifying questions. So unfortunately, that sort of gets mixed in late for a conversation that you're gonna have on the 28th. But to David's point, you'll have a score sheet. I would walk in the door with your score sheet complete so that you're ready to sort of have a conversation with folks, and we typically will want to collect those. I'm also fine for you all to score and rank on your own and re-score and rank based on conversations with your peers. I think we should all be open to like, oh, you caught something I didn't quite get. I actually would think of this differently if I had conceived that. So we should all understand that will happen in the room as well. And I think that's entirely the best practice and the way to do it, not just walk in like these are my scores. You can't sway. We should not do that.
Is there any way we can get the clarifying questions already put together today before Fridays, just to add to?
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
Say it
I want to
again.
get the recording, and so it'd probably be towards the end of the day tomorrow that we could get those out to you, but it'd be before Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that you can see them, make sure we got them right, and or
Well,
just, it might help you say, okay.
Right, and not say the same thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yep.
You have clarity in charge, what you're being asked to do,
Whole points only,
yeah.
1.5.
That's right. And again, I sort of laid out what I think we're doing.
They come to you with all sorts of stuff. I'm like, 0.36.
I laid out what I think this group will likely do on the 28th, but this is just me like trying to paint a picture. Like we will have an organic conversation and you all will decide what you are recommending to council. So like, just know I'm not trying to box you in with that. I'm just trying to offer enough sort of guidelines such that you have a little bit of an understanding of what the end product from a recommendation standpoint might look like, but the conversation should evolve how it evolves. And I'm available, reach out if you're stuck, like whatever you might need. In addition, like after even this sort of clarifying question period, if you're getting through your reviews and you just sort of want to sort of ping me on something, please reach out. Some combination of David and Avery and I can be a resource to you as well.
Thank all you guys for your.
Oh, y'all got to do some work.
For your guidance and assistance.
Some light reading.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Okay.
I went through and I went, oh, 403.
Well, I knew that as soon as I like, on it and it started.